My parents wasted my inheritance on my sister's influencer world tour, then turned up at my door with moving trucks, saying they were retiring with me. When they found out I'd already sold the house and moved weeks earlier, their shock was almost worth what they stole. Hey, Reddit, buckle up, because this one is going to be a long ride. I've been sitting on this story for about 3 months now, and I finally feel like I can share it without my blood pressure going through the roof. This is about my parents, my golden child sister, an inheritance meant for my future, and the moment I watched their entire retirement plan crumble in my old driveway. Fair warning, this story involves some serious family betrayal, financial manipulation, and the most satisfying moment of my entire 32 years on this planet. If you're here for drama, you came to the right place. So, let me give you some background. I'm Derek, 32 male, and I have a younger sister named Brianna, 28, female. From the day Brianna was born, she became the center of my parents' universe. I'm not being dramatic here. I'm talking about a level of favoritism so blatant that extended family members have commented on it at holiday dinners. My aunt once pulled me aside at Thanksgiving when I was 16 and said, "Honey, I don't know why your parents treat you like the help, but just know we all see it." That should give you an idea of how obvious this was. Growing up, the differences were constant and crushing. Brianna got the bigger bedroom even though I was older. When I asked why, my mom said it was because Brianna needed more space for her things. What things? She was 6, she had stuffed animals and some picture books. I was 12 and actually needed a desk for homework. Didn't matter. Princess got the master suite room, and I got what was essentially a converted closet with a window. Brianna got new clothes while I wore hand-me-downs from cousins. Every back-to-school season, my mom would take Brianna to the mall for a full shopping spree. New jeans, new shirts, new shoes, the works. I got a garbage bag full of my cousin Kevin's old stuff, most of which didn't fit right and smelled vaguely like his basement. When I complained once, my dad told me I should be grateful we have family that shares and that clothes are clothes. Meanwhile, Brianna was rocking limited 2 Injustice outfits, while I looked like a backup dancer in an early 2000s time capsule. The birthday disparity was legendary in our household. Brianna's birthdays were events. Themed parties with catered food, professional decorations, bounce houses, the whole production. Her Sweet 16 had a DJ for a house party. My birthdays were family dinner at home with a grocery store cake. One year they forgot entirely until I mentioned it at breakfast. My mom's response: "Oh, honey, we've just been so busy with Brianna's dance recital preparations." Brianna got a car for her 16th birthday, a brand new Honda Civic with a red bow on it, the whole 9 yards. Me? I got a lecture about how cars are expensive, and I should be grateful for the bus pass they provided. When I pointed out the obvious unfairness, my dad said, "Brianna needs a car for her dance competitions. What do you need one for?" My parents ran a small but successful insurance agency in our hometown in Ohio. They weren't wealthy by any stretch, but they were comfortable. Upper middle class, 2 vacations a year, nice house in the suburbs type of comfortable. They always told me that money was tight whenever I asked for anything. But somehow, there was always money for whatever Brianna wanted. Dance lessons, cheerleading camps, a trip to Europe with her friends senior year of high school. All of it just materialized out of thin air whenever Princess needed something. I worked my way through college, no help from them, not a single dollar. I took out loans, worked 2 jobs, and graduated with a degree in software engineering while running on 4 hours of sleep most nights. I worked as a server at a restaurant 3 nights a week and did data entry for a local company on weekends. My GPA was a 3.7, which wasn't easy to maintain when you're exhausted constantly and stressed about whether you can afford textbooks. One semester, I was short about $800 for tuition. I called my parents, swallowed my pride, and asked if they could loan me the money. My mom sighed and said, "Derek, we really can't afford to just give you money right now. Brianna needs new costumes for her dance team. $800 for my education versus sparkly leotards for a hobby." I ended up picking up extra shifts and eating ramen for 2 months to make up the difference. Meanwhile, Brianna, she went to a private university, fully funded by mom and dad, where she majored in communications with a minor in social media marketing. She graduated in 5 years because she needed to find herself and changed her major twice. Her college experience included a study abroad semester in Italy that my parents paid for, a sorority membership that my parents paid for, and an apartment off campus that my parents paid for. When she graduated, they threw her a massive party with catered food and rented out a venue. My college graduation, I invited them. They said they couldn't make it because it was the same weekend as one of Brianna's dance showcases. I walked across that stage alone, while my roommate's family cheered for me out of pity. That night, I got a text from my mom. "Congrats, sweetie. Sorry we couldn't be there. Brianna was amazing today." Here's where the inheritance comes in. My grandmother on my dad's side, Grandma Ruth, was the only person in my family who seemed to actually care about me. She was this sharp, no-nonsense woman who saw right through the family dynamics and never played along with the favoritism. When I was a kid, I used to spend summers at her house just to get away from the constant feeling of being invisible. She'd make me lemonade on her porch, teach me card games, and actually listen when I talked about my day. She was more of a parent to me in those summers than my actual parents were year-round. Grandma Ruth saw how my parents treated me. She called them out on it multiple times, which always led to awkward family dinners and cold shoulders. My dad would get defensive and claim she was making something out of nothing, but Grandma Ruth wasn't having it. She once told my mother directly, "You're raising one child to be entitled and the other to be resentful. Neither one is going to thank you for it." That was 7 years before she passed, and my mom barely spoke to her after that. She passed away when I was 25, and she left me her house in her will. Not my parents, not Brianna, me specifically. The will was crystal clear about it. Her lawyer told me she had updated it 3 times over the years to make sure the language was ironclad. She knew my parents would try to contest it, and she wanted to make sure they couldn't win. Grandma Ruth's house was a modest 3-bedroom place worth about $280,000 at the time, and she left it to me because, in her own words, written in a letter attached to the will, "Derek is the only one in this family who understands the value of hard work and deserves a foundation to build his life upon. His parents have failed him, but I refuse to let that failure define his future. This house is my apology for not doing more while I was alive, and my hope that he will use it to create the life he deserves." I cried for an hour when I read that letter. Someone finally saw me. Even if it was posthumously, someone in my family actually saw me. My parents were not happy about this. They contested the will, claiming Grandma Ruth wasn't of sound mind when she wrote it. They hired a lawyer and everything. The court disagreed. Grandma Ruth had anticipated this and had her mental competency evaluated and documented by a physician just 6 months before she passed. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she did it deliberately. The judge threw out the contest in about 15 minutes. They tried to guilt me into selling the house and splitting the money with the family. I refused. My dad sat me down and gave me this whole speech about how family shares and how Grandma would have wanted everyone to benefit. I reminded him that Grandma explicitly stated in writing that she was leaving the house to me alone. So clearly she didn't want everyone to benefit. He didn't have a response for that. They tried to convince me to let them manage the property since I was so young and inexperienced. The idea was that they would rent it out, handle the upkeep, and give me a portion of the profits. I could smell that scam from a mile away. They would pocket most of the money and probably never actually give me anything. I refused that too. For once in my life, I had something that was mine, and I wasn't letting them touch it. I moved into Grandma Ruth's house and spent the next few years fixing it up. New roof, updated kitchen, refinished hardwood floors. I put my blood, sweat, and weekends into that place. The value climbed to around $340,000 by the time everything in this story went down. I also built my career, working my way up to a senior developer position at a tech company. I was doing well, really well, and I did it all without a single cent of help from my parents. Meanwhile, Brianna discovered Instagram, then TikTok, then YouTube. She decided she was going to be an influencer, a content creator, a digital entrepreneur. Whatever buzzword made it sound like more than posting selfies and unboxing videos. She had about 15,000 followers when this whole thing started, which in the influencer world is basically nothing. But in my parents' eyes, she was the next big thing, a star waiting to be discovered. For 3 years, I watched my parents pour money into Brianna's career. They bought her camera equipment worth thousands of dollars. They funded professional photo shoots. They paid for editing software subscriptions, ring lights, backdrops, and more clothes than any human being could ever wear. They even paid for her apartment in a trendy part of Columbus so she could be closer to the content creation community. None of this was their money to spend freely. They were dipping into their retirement savings, but they were convinced it was an investment that would pay off. Spoiler alert, it did not pay off. Brianna's follower count bounced between 15,000 and 20,000 for 3 years. She wasn't going viral. She wasn't landing brand deals. She wasn't building an empire. She was just a moderately attractive girl posting mediocre content in an ocean of millions of other moderately attractive girls posting mediocre content. But my parents refused to see it. Every time I gently suggested that maybe Brianna should get a real job while building her social media presence on the side, I was accused of being jealous, negative, and unsupportive. Then came the Influencer World Tour. Brianna announced at Christmas dinner 2 years ago that she had a vision, a plan, a strategy that was going to catapult her into influencer stardom. She stood up from the table like she was about to give a TED Talk, pulled out her phone with a PowerPoint presentation she had apparently prepared for this moment, and started pitching our parents on her grand scheme. She was going to travel the world for an entire year, creating content from exotic locations: Bali, Paris, Tokyo, Dubai, Santorini, Tulum, the whole Instagram travel fantasy starter pack. She had done extensive research. She had scrolled through other influencers' accounts and determined that travel content was the key to exponential follower growth. She claimed this would give her unique content that would set her apart from other creators. She said brands would be falling over themselves to sponsor her once she had all this international footage. The presentation included graphs, projected follower growth curves, estimated brand deal values, potential sponsorship opportunities. It was all completely made up, of course. Just numbers she pulled out of thin air to make it sound like a legitimate business plan. But my parents ate it up like it was a pitch from a Silicon Valley startup. The cost? Approximately $120,000 for the full year. Flights, accommodations, food, activities, travel insurance, equipment upgrades, and of course, a generous living stipend so she wouldn't have to stress about money while she was busy creating content. The breakdown included $40,000 for flights and transportation and $35,000 for accommodations. She refused to stay anywhere that wasn't aesthetic. $20,000 for food and experiences, $15,000 for emergency funds and insurance, and $10,000 for new equipment, including a drone and a gimbal and a mirrorless camera body. I nearly choked on my mashed potatoes when my dad announced that they were going to fund this trip. He said it with this proud smile on his face, like he was a venture capitalist announcing a Series A investment, instead of a man about to make the dumbest financial decision of his entire life. Now, I knew my parents had been supporting Brianna financially for years, but $120,000? That's not support. That's insanity. I asked them flat out where this money was coming from. My mom got this weird look on her face, and my dad cleared his throat and said they'd been saving for a while and wanted to invest in Brianna's future. I knew something was off. My parents weren't poor, but they weren't sitting on $120,000 in liquid cash either. Not after years of funding Brianna's influencer dreams, but they refused to discuss it further. And Brianna just kept going on about how this was going to change everything for her and how grateful she was to have parents who believed in her. Meanwhile, I sat there thinking about the bus pass I got for my 16th birthday. Brianna left for her world tour in March of that year. The Instagram post started immediately, her lounging by infinity pools, her eating overpriced brunch at trendy cafes, her doing yoga poses on beaches at sunset. The content was fine generic, the same stuff every other travel influencer posts. Her follower count went from 18,000 to about 23,000 over the course of the year. Not exactly the explosive growth that was supposed to justify a six-figure investment. I tried to stay out of it. I had my own life to worry about. But something was nagging at me about where that money came from. So, I did some digging. I have a cousin named Patrick who works at the bank where my parents have their accounts. We've always been close. He was one of the few family members who actually treated me like a human being growing up. Before you get all up in arms about privacy violations, I didn't ask him to access their accounts. That would be illegal. And Patrick takes his job seriously. I just asked him a hypothetical question about how someone might liquidate a large sum of money quickly. He mentioned that he'd seen people take out home equity loans, cash out retirement accounts early, sell assets, or take personal loans. Then he gave me this look and said, "Why? Is someone in your family doing something stupid?" I didn't answer directly, but my face must have said everything. That's when it clicked. Home equity loan. My parents had paid off their house years ago. They were always bragging about it at family gatherings, how they were debt-free and financially responsible and blah blah blah. But a paid-off house is also a giant pile of untapped equity just sitting there. They could have borrowed against it. I did some public records research, and yes, this information is publicly available if you know where to look. Property records, liens, and mortgages are all part of the public record in most states. Sure enough, my parents had taken out a $150,000 home equity loan about 6 months before Brianna's trip. The filing was right there in the county recorder's office database, complete with the lender's name and the amount. They had literally mortgaged their fully paid-off home to fund my sister's Instagram vacation. These were people in their early 60s, nearing retirement, and they had just taken on $150,000 in debt for their 26-year-old daughter to take pictures of herself in front of landmarks. The monthly payments on that loan were probably around $900 to $1,000, depending on the interest rate, for 15 years. I did the math obsessively that night. They would be making payments on this loan until they were in their late 70s. If they retired at 65 as planned, they'd be paying nearly $1,000 a month out of their fixed retirement income. And for what? For Brianna to get slightly more followers on Instagram? For her to pretend to be a travel influencer for a year? Meanwhile, the $800 they couldn't spare for my college tuition sat in my memory like a splinter that never came out. I was furious. Not because they spent their own money, they're adults. They can do what they want, but because for my entire life, I had been told there wasn't enough. There wasn't enough for my college. There wasn't enough for a car. There wasn't enough for school supplies or sports equipment or anything I ever asked for. But there was apparently $150,000 available for Brianna to pretend to be famous on the internet. I decided right then that I was done. Done trying to have a relationship with people who clearly saw me as an afterthought. Done hoping they would someday treat me fairly. Done being the responsible child who got nothing, while the irresponsible one got everything. I started quietly planning my exit. See, I had been casually looking at job opportunities in other states for a while. Nothing serious, just keeping my options open. But now, I started applying with intention. Within 2 months, I had an offer from a tech company in Austin, Texas. Great salary, great benefits, great weather, and most importantly, 1,200 miles away from my parents. I accepted the job. Then I called a realtor. Selling Grandma Ruth's house was harder emotionally than I expected. That house represented the only family member who ever truly saw me and valued me. I had spent years making it my own, painting the walls colors I liked, planting a garden in the backyard, building a home office in the spare bedroom. There were still some of Grandma Ruth's things there, too. Her rocking chair in the corner of the living room, the china cabinet she had inherited from her mother, the quilt she made by hand that I kept on my bed. I spent a weekend going through everything, deciding what to keep and what to let go. I shipped the important stuff to Austin. The quilt, some photo albums, her recipe box full of handwritten cards, a few pieces of jewelry she had left me separately from the house. The rest I donated or sold. It felt like saying goodbye to her all over again. But I also knew that keeping the house would keep me tethered to Ohio, to my parents, to the constant reminder that I would always be second place in my own family. Grandma Ruth left me that house to give me a foundation. She would understand that I was using that foundation to build a better life somewhere else. The house itself wasn't the gift. The freedom it represented was. The realtor I hired was a guy named Dave, who came recommended by a coworker. He was efficient, no nonsense, and most importantly, discreet. I explained that I wanted this sale to be quiet. No signs in the yard, no open houses, just direct showings to qualified buyers. He didn't ask why, just nodded and said he could make that happen. The house sold in 3 weeks. Bidding situation, actually. 3 different families wanted it and kept trying to outbid each other. I ended up getting $365,000, which was $25,000 over asking. The irony wasn't lost on me that my parents' attempts to get me to sell the house and split the money years ago would have gotten them maybe $70,000 each. By waiting and improving the property myself, I'd made an extra $85,000 that was entirely mine. After paying off the remaining mortgage and closing costs, I walked away with about $290,000 in cash. I put most of it into investments and savings, kept some aside for relocating expenses, and mentally said goodbye to Ohio forever. Here's the thing, though. I didn't tell anyone, not my parents, not Brianna, not anyone who might let it slip to them. I had my mail forwarded to a P.O. box in a different part of town before I changed it to Austin. I kept my social media completely quiet about any moves. No posts about packing, no new chapter announcements, nothing. I continued responding to my parents' occasional texts with the same level of minimal engagement I always had. They never visited me anyway. In the 7 years I lived in that house, they came over maybe twice. And both times were because they needed something from me. So there was no risk of them showing up and seeing a for sale sign. I moved to Austin in September, found a great apartment, started my new job, and began building a life that had absolutely nothing to do with my biological family. It was the most peaceful I'd felt in years. No more guilt trips, no more comparisons to Brianna, no more being made to feel like I was somehow less than despite being the only responsible person in the entire family. Meanwhile, Brianna's world tour ended with a whimper instead of a bang. She came back to the States with 24,000 followers, barely 6,000 more than when she started, and absolutely no brand deals waiting for her. The content she created was, according to multiple comments on this very website when I looked her up, basic, forgettable, and the same stuff every other mediocre travel influencer posts. Harsh, but not inaccurate. The $120,000 was gone. The home equity loan payments were coming due, and my parents suddenly realized they had a massive problem. They were 62 and 64 years old, with $150,000 in debt and minimal retirement savings. They had apparently dipped into that too over the years. And a daughter who was now living back in their house because she couldn't afford her own apartment without their financial support. Their plan had been to work until 65, pay off the loan with their combined incomes, and then retire comfortably. But the economy had other plans. My dad got laid off from his job about 4 months after Brianna returned. The insurance agency he worked for was downsizing, and he was offered an early retirement package that was significantly less than he'd been counting on. Suddenly, 2 people who had spent decades spending money like it grew on trees were faced with the reality that trees don't actually produce money. Shocking concept, I know. I learned all of this through Patrick, my bank cousin, who heard it through the family grapevine. My parents were apparently in full panic mode, trying to figure out how they were going to afford their house payments, their debt payments, and supporting Brianna, all on my mom's salary alone. The answer, as it turns out, was that they couldn't. Then I got the call. It was a Saturday morning in January. I was sitting in my Austin apartment enjoying my coffee, and the fact that it was 65 degrees outside while Ohio was buried in snow. My mom's number popped up on my phone. I almost didn't answer. Our conversations had been reduced to maybe 1 call every 2 months, and they were always brief and surface level. But something told me to pick up. "Derek, honey, we need to talk to you about something important." Her voice had that particular tone that I recognized from childhood. It was the tone she used when she was about to ask me for something and was trying to butter me up first. I braced myself. "Your father and I have been doing a lot of thinking, and we've made a decision. We're going to retire and move in with you." I actually laughed out loud. I thought she was joking. She was not joking. She went on to explain that they had decided the best solution to their financial problems was to sell their house, use the money to pay off the home equity loan, and then retire to live with me in Grandma Ruth's house. They would help with household expenses, of course, and it would be so nice for us to finally spend quality time together as a family. Brianna would be coming too, at least temporarily, until she could get back on her feet and find her own place. Let me make sure you're understanding this correctly. My parents, who had spent my entire life treating me as an afterthought, who had funded my sister's every whim while telling me they couldn't afford to help me, who had taken out $150,000 in debt to send Brianna on a glorified vacation, now expected me to house all three of them indefinitely while they retired on whatever pittance they had left. And they just assumed I would say yes. They didn't ask, they informed. I was silent for so long that my mom asked if I was still there. Yeah, I said, I'm here. When exactly were you planning on making this move? She cheerfully informed me that they had already started packing, that they had listed their house last week and already had an offer, and that they expected to close in about 60 days. They were planning to arrive at my place in mid-March with a moving truck full of their belongings. They had already started packing. They had already listed their house. They had already accepted an offer. They did all of this before even consulting me about whether I wanted 3 additional people living in my home. We figured you'd be thrilled to have us, my mom said. That big house is way too much space for just one person anyway. And think about how much money you'll save on groceries when we're all cooking together. The audacity was almost impressive. I could have told her right then. I could have dropped the bomb that I had sold the house 6 months ago and moved to Texas. But something in me wanted to wait. I wanted them to experience the full weight of their entitlement crashing down on them in person. Call it petty, call it revenge, I call it justice. Okay, Mom, I said, I guess I'll see you in March. She was so pleased, so relieved. She went on for another 10 minutes about how she knew I would come through for the family, and how this was going to be such a great opportunity for all of us to reconnect, and how Brianna was really looking forward to spending time with her big brother. I made appropriate, agreeable noises while mentally choreographing the moment they would pull up to a house I no longer owned. The next 2 months were interesting. My parents called more often than they had in years, suddenly very interested in my life and my opinions. They asked about my job, my hobbies, my weekend plans. They sent me articles about intergenerational living and how it was becoming more common for families to share homes. They were laying the groundwork for their invasion with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. I played along. I asked questions about their moving plans. I offered suggestions about what they should bring versus what they should sell. I even said I was excited to see them. Every conversation was an acting performance worthy of an Oscar. Brianna texted me too, which was notable because she typically only contacted me when she wanted something. She sent me links to Austin influencer events and asked if I could get her connected with the local content creator scene. She talked about how she was going to use this fresh start to reinvent her brand and really focus on her career. She even suggested that I could be in some of her videos. You're actually pretty good looking for a tech nerd. I could make you like a side character thing. I said I'd think about it. Mid-March arrived. I got a text from my dad saying they were about 12 hours out and would probably arrive the next morning. They were driving a massive moving truck with Brianna following in her car, which my parents had been making payments on for her. I told him to have a safe drive and that I'd see them tomorrow. Then I went about my day in Austin, got coffee at my favorite local spot, went for a run along the river, made dinner at my apartment, slept 8 peaceful hours. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and about 40 text messages. It started with confusion. Derek, we're at the house, but there's a different name on the mailbox. Derek, call us back. Something weird is going on. Son, there are strangers living in your house. What is happening? Then came the panic. Derek, call us immediately. Where are you? Why is there a family living in Ruth's house? Did something happen? Are you okay? Then the anger. Derek, Michael, you need to explain yourself right now. We drove 16 hours and the house is sold. Your sister is crying. Are you happy now? I let them stew for about 3 hours before I called back. I wanted them to experience every emotion in that driveway. The confusion, the realization, the embarrassment of having to explain to a stranger why they were standing on their lawn with a moving truck full of furniture and nowhere to put it. When I finally called, my dad answered on the first ring. Derek, what is going on? His voice was shaking with a combination of rage and panic that I had never heard before. In the background, I could hear my mom talking frantically to someone, probably the current homeowners, trying to figure out why 3 people in a moving truck were refusing to leave their property. Hey, Dad, I see you made it to Ohio. Ohio? We're at your house. except it's not your house anymore. Apparently, there's a family here who says they bought this place 6 months ago. They have 2 kids and a dog, and they're very confused about why we're parked in their driveway. Yeah, that sounds about right. I sold the house in August, moved to Texas. Silence. Complete beautiful silence. For about 10 seconds, the only sound was Brianna's muffled crying in the background and what sounded like the new homeowner's dog barking. You what? I sold Grandma Ruth's house. Moved to Austin, Texas. Got a new job, new apartment, new life. It's pretty great, actually. Weather's been amazing. I went kayaking last weekend. My mom grabbed the phone. I could hear Brianna wailing in the background, full-on breakdown mode. Derek, this isn't funny. This is not funny at all. Where are we supposed to go? We sold our house. We have nowhere to live. We have a truck full of furniture and no place to put it. That sounds like a problem you should have considered before assuming you could move into my house without asking me. Also, without considering that I might have my own plans for my own property. You know, the property that Grandma Ruth left to me specifically because she knew you would try to take advantage of me. But we're your family. Family takes care of each other. Funny, I don't remember feeling much like part of the family when I was riding the bus while Brianna got a brand new car, or when I was working 2 jobs to pay for college while you funded her degree, or when you spent $120,000 on her vacation while telling me my whole life that money was tight, or when you couldn't spare $800 to help me with tuition, but you could find $150,000 to mortgage your house for Instagram content. Where was this family energy then? My dad took the phone back. Son, that's not fair. We always did the best we could for both of you. You took out $150,000 in debt to send Brianna on an Instagram trip. You never gave me a single dollar for anything. That's not doing the best you could for both of us. That's having a favorite and pretending you don't. There was more arguing, more excuses, more attempts to guilt me into somehow solving this problem I didn't create. My mom cried. Brianna apparently had a full meltdown in the car. My dad tried the stern father voice that stopped working on me approximately 15 years ago. I let them talk themselves out. Then I said my piece. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to figure out your own living situation. Maybe you can use what's left from selling your house to rent an apartment. Maybe Brianna can actually get a real job and contribute for once in her life. Maybe you can all finally learn that actions have consequences and you can't just expect other people to clean up your messes. But none of that is my problem anymore. Derek, please. We're your parents. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It means you had 32 years to treat me like your son instead of your backup plan. You chose not to. Now I'm choosing not to be your retirement plan. It's not personal, Mom. It's just math. You invested everything in Brianna. I'm not giving you returns on an investment you never made in me. I hung up. They tried calling back about 50 more times over the next few days. I didn't answer. They left voicemails ranging from apologetic to furious to desperate. Brianna sent me a text that just said, "I always knew you were jealous of me." This proves it, which honestly just proved that she learned nothing and probably never will. I learned that they ended up staying in a motel for a week while they figured out what to do. Apparently, the moving truck company charged them extra fees for every day they kept the truck past the return date, and they had to put most of their furniture in a storage unit because they had nowhere to put it. The storage unit cost them $200 a month. Just another expense they hadn't planned for. They eventually rented a small apartment about an hour from their old house. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, in a complex that looked like it hadn't been updated since the Reagan administration. My dad found a part-time job at a retail store, working the evening shift stocking shelves. My mom kept her job, but had to pick up extra hours. Brianna finally got work as a receptionist at a dentist's office, although apparently she complains about it constantly because she has to actually wake up early and deal with people who are always in bad moods because they're at the dentist. The home equity loan is still hanging over their heads. They'll be paying it off for years. The influencer dream is effectively dead, although Brianna apparently still posts occasionally to her 22,000 remaining followers. She's actually lost about 2,000 since the world tour ended because she stopped posting regularly. My parents are facing a retirement that looks nothing like what they planned, living in a two-bedroom apartment and working into their late 60s just to keep up with their debt payments. Here's where it gets even better. About 2 months after the driveway incident, Patrick called me with an update. My parents tried to get a personal loan to help cover expenses. They got denied. Their credit score had taken a hit from the home equity loan and maxing out credit cards during Brianna's world tour. The bank they'd been with for 30 years turned them down flat. Then Brianna's car got repossessed. Remember how my parents had been making payments on her vehicle? Those payments stopped when they couldn't afford them anymore. She came out of work one day to find her car gone and a repo notice on the ground. Patrick said she had a complete meltdown in the dentist office parking lot, ugly crying, screaming at her phone, the whole production. Her co-workers had to call my mom to come pick her up. Without a car, Brianna couldn't get to work reliably. Public transit in their area is basically non-existent, and Uber costs added up fast. She lasted about 3 more weeks at the dentist office before they let her go for attendance issues. So, now she's unemployed again, living in her parents' cramped apartment with no car and no income. My dad's part-time retail job cut his hours last month. He's down to maybe 15 hours a week, which barely covers anything. My mom picked up a weekend shift to compensate. So now she's working 6 days a week at 63 years old. The storage unit where they put all their furniture, they fell behind on payments. Got a notice that if they didn't pay the balance within 30 days, everything would be auctioned off. They had to sell most of the furniture themselves at a steep loss just to avoid the auction fees. All those antiques my mom spent decades collecting, the dining set that had been in the family for generations gone, sold to strangers for pennies on the dollar. Patrick told me my dad cried when they sold Grandma Ruth's old china cabinet, the one that had been in the family for 4 generations. The irony wasn't lost on me. They fought to keep me from inheriting Grandma's house, but they couldn't even hold on to her china cabinet. Meanwhile, I got a promotion at work. Senior developer to lead developer, with a team of 6 reporting to me, 20% raise. I used part of my bonus to put a down payment on a condo in a great neighborhood. 2 bedrooms, updated kitchen, a balcony with a view of the city skyline. I also started dating a woman named Sarah who works in marketing at a tech company downtown. We met at a friend's barbecue, hit it off, and have been together for about 4 months now. She knows the whole story about my family. Her response was simple. Sounds like you made the right call. Some people only learn when they face consequences. 2 weeks ago, I got an interesting piece of mail forwarded from my old P.O. box. A letter from my mother, handwritten, 6 pages long. She apologized for everything. The favoritism, the neglect, the way they treated me my whole life. She admitted they had made Brianna the center of their world and left me on the outside. The last page was a request. They wanted to know if I would consider helping them refinance their home equity loan. They were drowning in the payments and thought maybe if I co-signed, they could get better terms. She promised they would pay me back. I thought about it for exactly 0 seconds. I wrote back a short note. I'm glad you've had time to reflect. I hope things improve for you. I won't be co-signing anything or providing financial assistance. Best of luck. Mailed it the next day. Haven't heard from them since. Last week, I checked Brianna's Instagram. Her follower count is down to 19,000 now. Her last post was 3 weeks ago. A picture of a sunset with a caption about trusting the journey. Her world tour content is completely gone. Deleted every single post from that year. Long $120,000 trip. All that money, all that investment erased like it never happened. I took a screenshot of her profile and sent it to Patrick with a message. Guess the ROI on that trip wasn't what they expected. He replied with a single skull emoji. I actually laughed out loud. So, that's where things stand now. I'm in Austin, thriving. New job, new condo, new relationship, new life. My investments from the house sale are doing well. I've got a solid emergency fund, a growing retirement account, and 0 debt. I go kayaking on the weekends. I joined a volleyball league. My parents are in Ohio, struggling, working into their late 60s to pay off debt they took on for their favorite child, who is now unemployed and carless and living in their spare bedroom. The retirement they planned for doesn't exist. I don't wake up thinking about them anymore. I don't check my phone hoping they'll finally say the right thing. I made my decision. I executed it cleanly, and I moved on with my life. That's the whole story. Reddit. My parents blew my sister's inheritance on Instagram content, showed up expecting to retire in my house, and found out I had already sold it and moved 1,000 miles away. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come.